Welcome to Become the Leader, the show that equips you to rise higher, lead stronger, and become the leader you would follow.
Hey guys, welcome back to the Become the Leader podcast. We have a really exciting topic today. We are going to be talking about when to pivot and when to persist. I'm Meghan Slaughter with.
Mike Grigsby.
Oh, I'm Mike Grigsby. I buffered there. You caught me buffering for a minute there.
And, and I'm Jody Holland. We're excited to be with you. It's going to be a great topic. I know as I've thought about this topic, I really started thinking how many times, just because of stubbornness, that I persist well beyond the time that I should have. And I ended up wasting money or wasting effort or something along those lines. And there's a theory in psychology called the theory of sunk cost. And that theory of sunk cost basically just says once we've invested a certain amount of time, energy, or money into a project or into anything, we start thinking, well, I can't quit now. Otherwise, all this stuff will have been wasted. So, Mike, I know you've experienced that. Megan, I know you've experienced that. So, what is your metric for looking at something and going, we should finish. We should just be done.
Well, my kids always tease me. Years ago, I bought a pair of soccer slide sandals from Walmart on sale for $2, and I got the most lifespan out of those things. I probably 7, 8 years. They ripped, they tore. I was literally like stapling them back together one day, and my son was like, "Dad, it was $2. Just let it go." I think your point is right. We find that sense of investment. I think maybe in that instance, I think I was trying to see how long I could go with it. But the reality is, we really do feel that sense of investment. Like I can't let this go because I've put all this into it. I think when I've looked at this, obviously, Jody, you were just talking about sunk cost, but when venture capitalists, when they invest a lot of money into potential startup companies or startup companies with the potential to be big hits, they don't spend a lot of time going back and forth, and they don't have that personal investment side to really keep them in beyond when it's a meaningful investment for them. So maybe we need to take a page out of their playbook and start to look at what are the kind of the rubric that we'll use to determine whether we should pursue or whether we should kind of pivot on this.
Yeah. Megan, what's
I
yours?
think
What
it's
do you
really
know?
difficult.
Go ahead,
I
sorry.
think it's really difficult to determine when to pivot on things at times because of, like what Mike said, how much you're investing into it, whether that's time, money, energy, maybe a little bit of all of the above. And you just feel this sense of obligation to this project that you started to see it through. And I also think a big thing is you fear that you're going to be seen as a failure or you're going to feel that you failed personally if you let go of something. But I think the thing to understand is that sometimes pivoting is not giving up, it's just pursuing something in a different manner. So your end goal may be the same, but you're changing the direction that you're going in. You're focusing on different efforts. Maybe your project is transforming, but the end goal could potentially still be the same thing. You're trying to reach a certain outcome. It just might look different. And so I think figuring out when to pivot, kind of when you get to that point where you're just dedicating so much time and energy into it and you're not getting any sort of results and it's exhausting. Like you feel drained even just thinking about it anymore. If it comes to that point, that's when you know it's time to do something differently.
Cut it off. Yeah. So I was thinking about, as you were explaining that, Megan, I was thinking about the very first assessment conference that Mike and I went to in Waco, Texas with Profiles International. And we had purchased the franchise of Profiles and we're selling assessments. Jim Serbascu gets up there and he says, starts off his speech. He goes, I just want to let you guys know I have never, ever failed at hitting a goal. And my eyes got wide. I'm thinking, how did he do? Like, how do you hit every single goal? And then he let it long pause, and everybody's like, oh my gosh. And you hear the rumblings. And he goes, I've changed most of the deadlines. but I've still hit the goal.
Yep.
And I kind of combine that with a lesson that Mike has taught, one of the speeches you did about you are the deliverable, and describing that you've got to know your work, not just your job. And your work is different because your work is the purpose you were put here to do. And that's the part you don't want to fail at. So to me, you persist in your purpose, but like Megan, you were saying, you might pivot in your approach. So you change the way that you try to get to that purpose, but you still chase the purpose. And it's chasing the purpose that ends up mattering the most. It's like, I know I'm here to help people become the kind of leader that they would actually follow. I may do that with assessments. I may do that with training in person or online, or I may do that with coaching, but the goal is the same, that end result. It's just, I'm going to pivot like crazy on how I get there. And sometimes the pivot is required because the world changed. Like 2020, I couldn't do face to face training or face to face coaching. So I knew that persisting and demanding that I do it the way I'd always done it would result in me getting in a lot of trouble because there were rules about not being face to face with people. So I think sometimes circumstances will tell you when to pivot. But I think also, like you said, Meg, you get to the place where you go, I'm just not, I'm not chasing a thing that's worth chasing anymore. I'm spending a bunch and getting very little in return. And I wish I'd have been faster at learning that because I look back at a big chunk of my
Yeah.
career. Mike, I think
Yep.
you're agreeing with me on, I don't know if
Yeah.
it's about me
No,
or,
I'm just laughing about your career,
yeah,
not
good.
mine, not mine in any way.
But I think I stuck with trying to use this old company the way that I had imagined it for probably 10 years too long. Like, I should have quit it 10 years before I did. And when I finally was willing to walk away from that and change the way that I did business, all of a sudden everything started working exactly like it was supposed to. So if you never are willing to pivot, even though I think persistence is a great quality, you're probably going to lose a lot of money.
Well, I think that's the trick, right? I think there are a lot of things that will actually show us and prompt us for change, a market change, your own organization change, or personal goals, or dates and things along those lines. I think there's a lot of things that will kind of help us kind of pivoting kind of bubble to the top. The tricky part is when those, Megan, you said, if you're doing something and you're just not getting the returns you want. I think back while you were talking about that, what popped in my mind was the Betamax folks, right? Betamax folks invested a lot of time into something that was actually generating returns for them. It was generating, it was hitting all their internal goals, it was hitting all these things, all these internal metrics, but they missed some external clues, some external indicators that were pointing in a different direction. And that's when it becomes challenging, right? It's not the things that are glaringly obvious that says, hey, make a left turn here, right? It's the things that are subtle or subverted that, it's the subtext that says, hey, something's not right here. There's something else going on, paying attention to external factors or things along those lines. That's the real challenge. And I think a lot of our listeners will probably go, yeah, okay, what's the formula for that? When you can't detect it, how do you know when to pivot or when to persist?
Yeah.
And I don't think there is a clear answer on that, but sometimes you have to just make that decision personally and don't persist just for the sake of persisting. I think in business, we are taught to be resilient, to overcome challenges, to keep pushing through, never give up on your goals and your dreams. And while all of those things are incredibly valuable, I also think there's great value in learning how to let go of certain things. Don't hold on to it just because that's the way it has been. You have
Mhm.
to adapt. And one of my favorite quotes is see rejection as redirection. So it's not a hard
Like that.
no when you come to a roadblock. It's just a find a new path. So, you can still keep pushing forward and you can overcome these challenges. However, it's not that you're giving up on something, it's just that you're pursuing it in a different manner.
Say the quote one more time. That was good.
That was really good.
See, yeah, see rejection as redirection.
Very good. And I think that goes along with Napoleon Hill's, within every setback is a seed of an equivalent or greater
Right.
benefit. And I sometimes we get into competing directions. And I know that's been the case for me where I've got one thing that's kind of working, another thing's kind of working, but you realize neither of them are going to work great unless you dedicate your time to it. And there was a theory that you probably, if you took management classes, you probably looked at this heuristic on problem solving called Occam's razor that said when you're faced with competing hypotheses, the simplest explanation requiring the fewest assumptions is usually correct.
Hmm,
And so
I like that.
you look for what is it that actually makes the most sense? And I will admit, I really love doing business online. It's nice to do it online. I don't have to go anywhere. I've got people that just jump on a Zoom call with me or a Teams call, and we've got things rolling. But I also know sometimes people just really want the face to face. So when I'm competing with those two, the thing that is the easiest with the fewest assumptions for the customer is the right path. And that's sometimes the pivoting, like you look at venture capitalists like that you mentioned, Mike. Venture capitalists generally judge whether to keep going or dump and run based on the response of the market. So it has, I mean, some of it's the company, but it's also can seem like a great idea in a boardroom and then nobody buys it. And I had a company that was like that worked really, 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 really hard to make it successful.
Yeah.
And as long as I would work, I don't know, between 27 and 98 hours a day personally, then I could keep it running and making profits.
Right.
But that also wasn't the right answer because the simplest answer with the fewest assumptions is only sell the products that solve problems important enough to pay for. So I think you pivot once you realize there's not an actual market for your product or your service. And you still want to solve this problem, but that path wasn't the right path. And that's when to pivot. And I think you persist when you see that maybe you just haven't figured out how to explain it right, but that thing solves the problem really well for the customer, and the customers want to pay for the product once they've experienced it. So then you really have a copywriting or branding problem. You don't have a product problem. So I think that's some of the evaluation you look at there.
Yeah, I think the other side of it too is that a pivot doesn't mean completely jettisoning what you've done before, right? Like completely abandoning that. Venture capitalists, there are VCs out there who have made investments into startup companies where what the company is doing is not working, but they want to invest in that entrepreneur, and they sit down with that entrepreneur and say, give me your other ideas or help me understand what else you want. So they'll jettison that, but they'll keep the investment in the individual.
Yeah.
Point being is you don't have to throw away everything, right? Making that pivot is like Meghan said, it's a redirect, right? You are pulling back all the resources or redirecting, reallocating all the resources that you were using before, just aimed in a different direction or having a different goal or going after a different objective. And I think it's essential too. And Meghan, I think you kind of alluded to this. Don't don't pivot or persist, either one of those, right? Don't pivot or persist just for the sake of pivoting or persisting, right? Don't change just for the sake of change. Don't stay just for the sake of change or staying. You have to look at it. You have to weigh all these things. And one of the things, one of the reasons I believe that people get stuck in the dilemma of persist or pivot is because they don't take the time. Either they don't know how to, they don't want to invest the energy, or some other reason, but they don't want to pay attention to all of the factors. And it's a lot. There are a lot of factors to pay attention to. And none of us can account for all of it, but we do have to do the due diligence to say, all right, if if I'm an entrepreneur, if I'm a sole in a sole proprietor business and I'm the only entrepreneur or I'm the CEO of a company and I want to make the decision to pivot, what's my board of directors in my mind? What's my board of directors going to say when I justify why I want to pivot? Or what's my board of directors in my mind going to say when I want to justify that I want to persist? Right? If you can answer those questions to a satisfactory point, you're probably on the right road to getting to the answer that you're trying to achieve.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I really think there's a third caveat to this as well, and that is when to put something on pause. So you have pivot,
Oh, I like it.
persist, or pause.
We're
And that's
alliteratives.
when the timing is not right. It doesn't mean that the project is not right, but maybe the timing isn't working out because of personnel changes, current market demands, or a number of other factors. It doesn't mean that you have to not pursue this, but maybe you need to pursue it at a later date and focus your efforts elsewhere for now. Not forever, but at least for now.
And I think sometimes you just don't have the right leadership in place to pivot. And I've talked about this with companies for years that we do outgrow the thinking of certain leaders. I mean, there is a time where you go, that's not the guy anymore. That's not the girl anymore to run the show. And it's because they refuse to take the blinders off to what they've already done. And one example of that that I could think of from modern time is you look at what happened with Southwest Airlines with their crew scheduling. It's an IT problem, but that's all they saw it as. It was just IT's complaining. It's just an IT problem. And it was going to cost too much money for them to fix it. So they didn't fix it. They just let it continue to run as an IT problem. Now think about what that cost them when they had
Right.
a major storm, and then all of a sudden you're having to try to figure out the crew stuff. And they had always operated off of a management principle called heroics, which is you have these really talented people that you know can come in and fix the problem and they can fix it quickly, that kind of stuff. But if you don't have those people on board or engaged, you're not fixing anything. So once they got to the point where they had been warned repeatedly by employees and through internal memos, everything crashed. It cost them the equivalent of starting from scratch on software in one incident.
Yeah.
So that's when the pivot should have happened much sooner, but they persisted with what they knew. And in response, it wasn't just, oh, let's fix the software. There were leadership changes that happened in order to get it back on track, to rebuild trust with in the investor community, as well as to rebuild trust with their own teams. Instead of just working around it, they needed people to collaborate and work through it. So I think about things like that is a lot of times it's not like, oh, that door shut and I'm going to have to go a new direction. It was a gentle shut. It's more like you get kicked in the teeth, then you get the door slammed in your face, and then people laugh at you. And you go, oh, should have saw that coming sooner. So having these vision meetings about what's gonna happen in the world, and like each of you is saying, watching market trends, watching what was happening, really looking at our available information and then seeing any trending that we need to stay in front of puts us in the right place. Because you could take Kodak, knowing that they should have switched to the digital camera that they invented, but they kept the other one because they made so much money off of printing pictures and selling film. So they delayed. Or you could look at the Blockbuster fiasco, where they had one CEO that, because a board was short sighted and cut his bonus, he decided to move on. And the next CEO that came in said, he was looking at like, deliver the DVDs to their homes. Like, we're not going to do that. Nobody, this is a quote, nobody would give up the experience of going to the video store. And the only experience I remember was being charged late fees if you were 1 minute late or you didn't rewind it right. They would, when it was a VHS tapes, you get charged for that. So it wasn't a great experience going there, but he was short sighted and said, we're not going to do that. A couple of years later, they're bankrupt. They're replaced. You've got, Netflix and Redbox and Hulu and all these other things now that replaced Blockbuster, who owned like 90% of the video rental market across the whole United States. So if we don't watch the trending and we don't see what's coming, we'll never get in front of it. And I know that's difficult in business because that requires us to look at almost continuous change. When you create a good strategic plan, it's where do we want to be in a year? What do we see in everything in 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 50 years, 100 years from now? Like if your business was still going to be around in 100 years,
Mhm.
how would you have to think? And that's very different thinking to look at it from that angle.
One of the things you were pointing to in your story there, Jody, is I think also it's not just timing of like what the market is doing or anything, but timing on when you make your pivot, like getting out in front of it early enough. So your example with regard to Southwest, and this has happened, I consult nationally on technology and so forth. And one of the things that I have seen is people dragging their feet, organizations dragging their feet on making necessary and known changes for digital transformation, making sure the evolution of their technology is there. And my kind of caveat to them, my warning to them is you are going to pay for this. You're not saving money right now. In fact, you right now, by not choosing to do something, you're effectively buying a breach later on or a failed implementation or later on. And it's going to cost you even more than whatever you think you're trying to save here. Not everybody buys that. Everybody agrees with it, but not everybody buys into that. That's not the motivator. The point being is pivoting or persisting can be really, really costly if you are thinking that, to your point of staying, being in business for 100 years, if you think the next 100 years are going to be constant and you're making a decision today thinking that's how it's going to be 100 years from now or next Tuesday, right?
Right.
You're missing a huge, huge, huge opportunity, and potentially you are inviting a massive challenge for
Yeah.
yourself.
And throw in there, Megan and I have been doing a lot of consulting. We're running some advisory groups for HR now. And one of the things people talk about is when do you persist in trying to invest in a person? And when do you
Mm,
go, it's not going to work?
right.
And my lens has always been if the person is willing to learn and wants to grow, I'll keep investing. But when the person is always right and refuses coaching, I'm done.
Mhm.
And Megan, you want to add something in there?
I think that's very true. I think it applies to people as well as organizations. But to Mike's point, you're going to pay for it either way. So would you rather pay for it now or wait until it snowballs and becomes worse? And I think a lot of the time we put these blinders on because we get really excited about things and we have a passion for something. And so we ignore all of the warning signs, even though they're blinking at us in neon bright lights. We don't want to see that. So we just keep pushing forward on the path that we're currently on. But at some point, it becomes a problem that's so bad that you have no choice but to change. And it becomes a lot more difficult if you resist that change early on. So sometimes it's letting go of your ego, letting go of your own passion for something, and just figuring out with your team how to move forward effectively. And I think that was really hard for me too, especially in my undergrad, because I was in journalism. So I worked for the student newspaper and I had an editor who would give us this speech like every so often about how sometimes you need to let go of your stories. Like, I know you really care about it. I know you're passionate about it. It's your baby that you want to raise up and continue caring for, but maybe that needs to go to somebody else, or, maybe we need to find a new topic for you. And so letting go of the things that you love can be really difficult, but it can also be really rewarding because you find something else that takes its place and finds root in your life.
Yeah. And as a writer, you hear things like kill your darlings. You know,
Yes.
stop being obsessed with having, oh, this is my baby, this is my project. Kill it, because it's not the project that matters, it's the outcome. So final thoughts from you, Mike, and then I've got a quote to wrap us up.
Yeah, I'm rereading for the 120th time The War of Art by Stephen Pressfield, and one of the things he talks about is turning pro, and that's exactly what you talk about. You don't do it for the amateurish love, do it for the professional love, the love that is so deeply ingrained that you can't not do this thing. And what that allows you to do is not over invest and not over identify with the thing you're doing, so you don't miss those pivot points, and allows you to just, like I said, like Steven says, turn pro.
Yep, that's it. So I want to leave you with this. You don't pivot because things are hard. You pivot because the system can't improve fast enough to win. So persistence is commitment to progress, not loyalty to the original plan.
It's
So
good.
keep that in mind
I
as you
love that.
think about when to persist and when to pivot. I appreciate you guys being on today. Don't forget to share this with your friends. Like this if you do, and share it. But also make sure you subscribe. We're putting out a podcast every Wednesday morning at 7:15 a.m. If you haven't downloaded the Jody Holland Inc. app, look for that on Google Play and on the Apple App Store. You can get those, and then you can listen to the podcast through that or anywhere you get your podcasts. We'll put this on YouTube as well. So I am Jody Holland,
I am Mike
I'm
Grigsby.
Meghan Slaughter.
and we can't
Sorry.
wait to see you on the next one. We got that wrapped up quick. We had the lag time in the beginning, but we got to nailed it at the end there. All right, we'll see you guys on the next episode. Thanks for joining Become the Leader. Keep growing forward and become the leader you would follow.